y'all, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to the yearly roundup videos that are discussing the worst and the best makeup, in my opinion, allegedly, of 2020. Today we're starting off real simple with the best eyeshadow palettes of 2020, but definitely stick around because we are going to be doing the best makeup that's not an eyeshadow palette, as well as the worst makeup of 2020. I'm actually pretty excited because looking back on other of these videos, I don't have nearly as much makeup to talk about, which means I was at least somewhat successful in bringing less into my collection, as well as being more discerning about what I was bringing into my collection, which resulted in a smaller amount of awful products to talk about. But that video will have its time. I will apologize. I do have a list here. I do not have every single eyeshadow palette that I'm talking about with me. As most of y'all may know, I am in Tennessee helping take care of my grandmother, and a lot of the eyeshadow palettes on this list are in Virginia. And I didn't want it to be February before I got these videos up, so we're just gonna kind of have to talk about what we have on hand and then talk about what we don't have on hand with the handy dandy picture putter inner software stuff. This video has taken me a lot longer than I would like to admit to bring out, because I have been dealing with a heck ton of the anxiety and the depression. It's been riding at an all-time high. For any of y'all with the Snapchat and the Twitter, the majority of you have been able to see this and experience it in real time. But y'all don't want to hear about my depressive, emotional, whatever issues. We're just gonna go in and talk about what I believe are some of the best released palettes of 2020. And I will try my absolute hardest when updating and uploading this to remember to link down below beneath the palettes correlating reviews and try-ons for said palettes. Sometimes I fail, but I will try my hardest to have all that shiz down below for you. And we're gonna start off on a very, very high note. We had this year the Melt Cosmetics X Beetlejuice collection, which, if y'all did see my try-on and my review, I feel that not every part of that collection was created equal. These, however, were created absolutely beautiful. I am pretty sure, at least as of filming, they are available on Sephora, not the rest of the collection. Not entirely sure what that shiz is all about, but that's probably the link I'm gonna leave down below. We have here this beautiful The Waiting Room palette, which y'all would have seen me use in my try-on and lose my absolute shiz over and discover my love for the Smoky. I am actually using the shade Charman right here on that deep dark outermost corner. It has become one of my absolute favorite blacks. Then we've got the recently Deceased, which my only issue with this, and with honestly both of these, is I wish they had a little bit more variation between the colors, and I wish this one had been a 10 pan instead of an 8 pan. But that being said, the quality on these two eyeshadow palettes is some of the best quality I've experienced from Melt Cosmetics. And that's saying a lot, because I hold a lot of Melt Cosmetic palettes in high esteem. I think this is something that was absolutely beautifully formulated, not just on the market, but by them on a whole. This Neurotic shade has been one of my favorite greeny, goldy, grungy shimmers. Absolutely love it for as kind of like repetitive and not as expansive of a color story as I necessarily would have liked. What you get in here is so beautifully formulated, so well done. I'm honestly not sure what I was expecting with these. Probably maybe not as much because they're a limited edition situation. But limited edition or not, these have been a flawless experience to work with. Very typical Melt shadows, heckin' pigmented, heckin' fallout. Keep that in mind. Not a beginner formula. But these two palettes absolutely exceeded any and all of my expectations I had on just blendability, wearability, being able to work with them. It was just an absolutely wonderful experience. Then we might as well get some more Melt Cosmetics out of the way. Like I said, as I was going through and like being like, I reviewed that, I was like, that happened this year? I swear with all the shiz these people be coming out with, it's just like, I'm like, that wasn't 3 years ago. You sure that was 2020? So we have an absolute favorite, the Rust palette, which is an absolutely stunning addition to my collection. I love this palette so much. In my best 10 eyeshadow palettes from 10 different brands, this one actually beat out the Gemini palette because I love it so stinking much. The matte to shimmer ratio on this thing, the gradation, the quality, the blendability. This is just Melt Cosmetics at its best. Then obviously we have the 420 palette, which color-wise, this gets me. I mean, I feel like I would show this to a normal person. They'd be like, ah, yes, lovely. Shades of puke. And my alternative edgy color, yellow, grunge, green, puke color wearing person is like, yeah, oh yeah, get it all up on me. I love the shades in this. These two, actually these I love them all. I love them all. Again, matte to shimmer ratio, absolutely perfection. This shimmer is one of those typical melt formulas where it's a bit chunky, it's a little bit thick. You want to use a very dense brush with this shiz because you want to be able to pick it up and kind of pat it on and then smooth those chunks out. If they had made this a matte, this would probably be a end all be all holy grail all matte eyeshadow palette. But I don't mind there being just one shimmer and all the mattes you do get. I need to pull this shiz out. I love how I do this and I'm like, oh, I love it so much. And I'm like, when did I wear it last? 2021, I'm gonna need to start redoing my makeup rotation. It's been a little bit difficult to do that because part of my makeup is in Virginia and part of my makeup is in Tennessee. So it's like, what do we do? But I really, really, really love these palettes. They are absolutely, they work well together. That's part of what I love about the eyeshadow palettes that Melt comes out with is you keep getting them and you keep stacking them up and then they just keep working so well together. Like if I were a Depot person, which I'm not, I would get me a big old non-Z palette, and I would depot all my Melt shadows and just have them together and have one big giant chimera hybrid amazing everything palette because the formulas work well together and the color stories just build on each other so beautifully. Impeccable. Absolutely love both of these. The Rust is a must for like a neutral whatever sort of person. This one kind of skirts the edge a little bit more, being a little weird, a little funky, but absolutely love both of these. Need to pull this shiz out. Then we might as well finish up with Melt Cosmetics, one that I do not have with me, but the Melt She's in Parties palette, which I do have a review of. Like I said, I will try my hardest to have everything linked down below for y'all. This palette was one that I got because it looked so pretty. It was very purpley, very reminiscent, honestly, to kind of the color whatever that I'm doing with my wig right now. And in my opinion, even though the palette was a bit more shimmer heavy than I would have liked, it's one of their smaller ones, the same size as the Smoke Sessions ones, but the quality, again, when Melt does it right, they do it right. And then when they do it wrong, it turns into all kinds of Jesus take the wheel, but this time they did it right. And the formula was just so beautiful. I feel like what Melt did with the She's in Parties palette is sort of like what KVD could have done with the Lolita palette. or even honestly the Lolita Por Vida palette, because both of those took something that I absolutely loved, tried to run with it, and did it kind of okay. Whereas this palette took that deep, dark, decadent, dreamy sort of situation and really just formulated it to perfection. The shimmers were one of the formulas by them that I absolutely love. The mattes were typical Melt Cosmetic mattes that I can get behind, I know how to use. And just all in all, it became the palette like in that little color story for as like little as what you got was really stinking good, because Melt Cosmetics is on the pricey side of things. And for getting 8 shades in those eyeshadow palette, you pay a lot of money, but what you are paying for when they do it right is absolutely sublime. I love that palette. I will even take the shimmer and run that all up in there, up in here. It is a beautiful palette to layer and play with. Again, it plays really well with its siblings. So it was one that I kind of was just like, oh, well, I'm gonna buy it to review it because I'm a beauty YouTuber that reviews stuff. And it ended up again being one of those ones that just exceeded any sort of expectation I had, and I was just like, yes, thank you, this is what it's all about. Surprisingly, especially if you consider looking back on my other years of this year we have one, just one from Anastasia Beverly Hills, and you might even argue that it's not really from Anastasia Beverly Hills, it's from Norvina. From the Norvina collection, they released their Pro Pigment Palette Volume 4, which in my mind, arguably is probably the best one. Like, my favorite is the 3, but I think that this one is the best one regardless. 2020 wasn't a big release year for ABH, which on certain levels was really good, and on other levels was kind of just really like, we asked for less. We didn't ask for less in this capacity. But we'll be touching on that in another video. Today we're talking about this, which is the Bomb Diggity Shiznit. I use this in a trying makeup on with the Lunar Beauty Manny MUA Moon Prism Blush Palette. And this palette, despite having 2 pressed glitters, is just really well done. I think they said this was supposed to be, I mean, I feel like ABH and Norvina kind of reach when it comes to some of their comparisons and their whatevers, because they were like, this is the rosy purpley extension palette of the Soft Glam, which y'all know your girl is a huge heckin' freaking fan of that Soft Glam palette. So they said extension palette, and I said shut up and take my money. And honestly, I mean, I haven't used this with the Soft Glam palette. I probably should, but on its own, I absolutely love this. The pinks, the soft, the neutrals, the matte to shimmer ratio. I feel like out of the Pro Pigment Norvina palettes, this is one of the most user-friendly palettes where you can just pick it up and you're not like, okay, here's a blue, here's a green, here's an orange, here's a yellow. You know, this has a concise color story. This is something that you can get a little bit fun and funky. You can go more bright, vivid pink, or you can do those more softer, nice, more neutral. We've got this kind of orangey here, a little bit of reddy here. You know, it's got a lot of different things going for it. And for how much they charge for these ding dang things, I feel like this is one of the most like versatile and usable. I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm like, I need to dip into this shiz, which is funny because this is the stuff that I brought with me to Tennessee to dip into. I found that the quality of this one was just really well formulated, pigmented, blended well, wasn't patchy, just all in all, this is probably, as much as I love the 3, and I love the 1 and the 2 too, but this one just kind of stands out from among them as being like, if I were to recommend to someone who's like, hey, I just want to get one, which one would you recommend? I would say this one, because it's user friendly, it's easy to read, you've got a lot of variety with it while it's still being wearable, and then you can also have some fun with it. So this one I do absolutely love. As most of us know, 2020 was the year of Raw Beauty Kristi, something that I was absolutely so happy to be a part of. She just received 2020 for like everyone else was like, and 2020 God was like, Kristi, this is going to be your year, my boo. And she had a collaboration with Pure, which I must admit, if this had been in collaboration with any other person, probably wouldn't have bought that shiz. But because it was Raw Beauty Kristi, I was like, kind of gonna need to get my hands on that shiz. Which it did take me a while to get my hands on that shiz, because this shiz was sold out a lot. And then there was one day I was just kind of futzing through Ulta and I was like, aha, yes, I knew there was a reason I was saving my points, because this was in stock. And that's exactly what happened. I emptied out my points and I'm like, that's it, Ulta, goodbye. And you have this beautiful, beautiful neutral side with all these beautiful colors. I love these 2 colors right here. Absolutely stunning. Matte to shimmer ratio, perfection. And then you got this bright side, which has this beautiful, beautiful dandy. I mean, these 3 right here, I will use those in neutral looks. And then this beautiful here, the only shade that I'm not a huge bomb diggity shiznit fan of, that's this matte white. It's just because I am not cultured or makeup talented enough to understand, perceive, and comprehend the intricacies of a white matte shade and a colorful palette and how to use it. I've come to terms with that. I'm okay with it. Everything else is absolutely amazing. I mean, I've tried Pure eyeshadows before. Let me tell you, none of them have been this experience. Like, if you were to just like take all the pans out of this, blindfold me, do whatever, and be like, all right, what brand do you think did this? I would not say Pure Cosmetics. The experience of using this, like if Pure were to raise the bar of the standard of their eyeshadows to whatever the frig they did this, yeah, I'd be a lot more interested in buying them because it was absolutely beautiful. They were pigmented, they blended, they looked well, these play really nicely with others, especially these brights, because I'm not, this is like Butte Bean levels of talented, or Lacey, or Teresa, or Hannah, or Audra, you know, those gals, they be doing all kinds, I'm gonna take this and put it here, and this over here, and this blah, and I'm all like, there's not enough of a natural gradation. So I've used these in conjunction with other palettes, and they've worked really nicely. I love this Cafe Disco shade right here, a beautiful shimmer. And then for some reason, this has been the year, I love how I say, this has been the year of neutrals for me when I'm doing something like this. But I have really been reaching out of my comfort zone and leaning more towards, like, I was just like, yeah, okay, bright colors, I love it. But I saw this side and I was like, oh, yeah, F me. Oh, I love that this is like a pasty setting shade, but it is a hint of peach and does work really well, at least on my, you know, pasty ghost light complexion. Love this. Absolutely love this. Wouldn't have given it a second whatever Pure would have, if Pure just released it as an eyeshadow palette, I would have been like, yeah, that's pretty, but I ain't so sure about the quality. But it had Kristi's stamp of approval, so I bought it and I absolutely love it. One of my favorite actual makeup products by Pure that I like, because a lot of their skincare is really good. Then enter ColourPop, which is a company that I've been kind of like, 2020 and Sarai and ColourPop, we had some words over the year, but they were like, hey, we're gonna collaborate with her amazingness as well. This is at Forest Sight, which F's me up in all sorts of ways. Y'all, this shiz is absolutely beautiful. The matte to shimmer ratio, the color theory, This is, I feel, because ColourPop this year, last year, 2020, they've been doing all kinds of tomfoolery and nonsense with releasing everything under the sun. And they weren't releasing interesting things. They were just releasing things. And most of them looked like just basic rehashed versions of the same thing they released, 2 months ago. This was one of the most interesting and unique things that they did, color story wise as well as quality wise. It makes me very upset. Y'all know this. When you have an established company that's all like la 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 la, and they cannot keep a consistent line with their eyeshadow, there is no reason for it. If y'all can produce this, y'all can reduce the other stuff to the same standard. I'm sorry. And this is such a nice palette. I mean, it is like such a beautiful, I love this. I love this. And compared to everything else that ColourPop had been releasing, even if they'd like released this and it wasn't raw Beauty Kristi, I probably would have bought it because I love the shades and the tones in here. The greens and then the brownies and then the blue and the just matte to shimmer ratio. This shiz had absolutely everything going for it and I absolutely love it. Now let's talk about the one other ColourPop mention on this list. Good ColourPop. Star Wars, The Mandalorian, The Child palette with also like the At Forest Sight, even if it hadn't been all kinds of Grogu cute baby Yoda situation going on here, I'd have bought this shiz anyway because it has those beautiful dark green, grungy, brown, rusted gold bronze situation. And once again, compared to a lot of the other shiz that ColourPop was releasing that year, this was actually interesting. I mean, you look at these two and you're like, oh, okay, there's actually an interesting and unique color story behind this shiz. They work beautifully together. I did do that on camera and I loved my look and I've used them a lot ever since. The matte to shimmer ratio, not as good on this one, but the shimmers you get are really nice. I love the mattes. I love it here. They're beautiful, amazing companion palettes. Like if ColourPop actually took time between their releases to curate something that's actually color-wise interesting rather than just repeatedly releasing the same sort of rehashed boring neutrals and giving it some kind of cute and kitschy theme, I would be so much more okay with them as a company because I've got so much love and so much beef with ColourPop because there's so many products by them that I love, and then they just keep releasing shiz and I'm like, you guys are one of the worst offenders. They've reached the point where they are worse than Two-Faced with how much nonsense they release every other week. But amidst all of the nonsense in 2020, they did release these two and I absolutely love them both. Now let's talk about the eyeshadow palettes that I don't have with me that I probably will be bringing back with me when I go to Virginia. Let me know if y'all would like to see a video of like what makeup I'm packing with me to take to Tennessee because y'all know your girl's starved for content ideas. But we've got 3 very iconic, very important, very eye-opening palettes for Soraya from Natasha Denona. We have got, in no particular order, the Love palette, the Bronze palette, and the Glam palette, which are 3 eyeshadow palettes that I absolutely love. I started reviewing her $65 palettes with the Sunrise palette, and I liked it, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, I'm more okay to spend $65 than I am $129, though we saw that happen this year as well. And then she released the Love palette. I anti-hauled that shiz, and then I was like, you know what, I want to spend money anyway, and I bought it, and I fell in love with that palette. I fell in love with the formula. Whatever the flip she is doing for these $65 palettes, if she were to take that same passion, that same ingenuity, that same formulation, was like, hey, I'm gonna go do that on my $129. I'd probably be more inclined to buy those, but she hasn't, so we just buy the $65 ones. The Love one is like, all of them are like, this is what I love about the Natasha Denona $65 palettes, because the Love one is the mature, sophisticated, sort of curated version of his blood sugar. The Bronze is sort of a more mature, sophisticated, curated version of Orgy. And then Glam is, again, the mature, sophisticated, curated version of Cremated. So if you're someone who's sort of interested in the look of those Jeffree Star palettes, but you don't necessarily want to either, one, support him, or two, go like balls to the wall into those color stories, highly recommend the Natasha Denona palettes, because I mean, when your girl has an eyeshadow palette that is not only neutral, the Bronze one, you know, not exactly my wheelhouse of everyday, and two, has a higher shimmer than to matte ratio, and I still think that palette is like an 11 out of 10. That says something about the formulation. And the formulation on all three of those, they just create such, the matte formula, pigmented, blends like butter. The shimmer, the shimmers in the Bronze and the Glam, some of the best shimmers I've ever used in my life. So if you're going to go in on Natasha Denona, I would recommend trying out, dipping your toes into one of those 65. I'd recommend it over Huda Beauty. I would be bypass that. Go to Natasha Denona, get you one of those, because they're just like the quality, the formulation. Every time I use them and every time I review them, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember why this is the bomb diggity shiznit. Because it is. It's one of those eyeshadows where I'm like, it's pricey. It's probably overpriced. Any kind of makeup we buy is overpriced. But the experience of using them is still really nice. And I definitely highly recommend them for someone who really wants to invest in something a bit more high end, but maybe doesn't want to go balls to the wall, $129, because I've gone balls to the wall, $129 twice, and it hasn't been good either time. Those ones were just, she just kept releasing them, and they just kept getting better and better. The matte to shimmer ratio kind of kept getting smaller and smaller in the matte department, but I could not, the formula just so good. Y'all would have seen in my reviews that I was just like, matte to shimmer ratio, I'd love it to be different, but dang, the shimmers you get are, if I'm gonna have a high shimmer ratio, I want those shimmers to be formulated like this shiz. I'm gonna talk about some palettes that I've seen kind of come in and out of stock. They're sort of one of those ones that got away, we haven't kind of come on lockdown about whether they're gonna keep being restocked. They're not permanent, they are permanent, but ABH Cosmetics Sweet Shop eyeshadow palettes, which I honestly purchased on kind of a whim. I had a whole bunch of y'all that were like, you see this shiz? Oh, it's cute, it's aesthetic, it's ice cream, it's monochromatic. Oh, you need this shiz. I had at least 12 of y'all send me those kinds of messages, and I was like, okay, all right. I guess I'll get a review out of that. And then apparently they became like this, the green one and the blue one and the purple one, like sold out like that. And then they were just gone by the time I got my review. Either my try on and my review, they were just gone from the site. I was like, okay, la. Nothing. All right, can I get something? And I think like one of them was still available. The other ones, they just didn't show up. They were just gone off the face of the internet. And I was like, okay, what happened? And apparently they just had like a really significant boom, and for good reason. Probably some of the best drugstore affordable priced eyeshadows, though they were a little bit pricey. They're like $18, which I find it funny how I'm over here being all like 65, it's so worth it. And then I'm like 18. But they were definitely worth the 18. I mean, they were so good, especially when you can find, most color lovers probably know this, if you can find affordable, colorful eyeshadow that is formulated as well as those palettes were, it is a moment of beauty. And the green one, the pistachio and the cotton candy and then the orange one and the red one. I loved all of them. They were all just really well done. It's again, like if BH Cosmetics were to be like, all right, I see this formulation and I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it. We're going to reformulate every single eyeshadow we ever make to this formulation. I would shut up and take my money. Like, I'd never been a huge BH Cosmetics eyeshadow fan person, but after trying these other palettes, I was like, kind of interested in that. You know, it was piquing my interest more now that I'd tried this just amazing, fantastical formula. These palettes were just so nice. I hope a lot of y'all were able to get your hands on them. I know that Britt Clark and Karen Harris would post and tweet and stuff every time they would come back into stock. So I hope a lot of y'all were able to get in on that because they were so well done. And I hate it when you have something that's so well done and then it's like, well, it's gone. Sucks to be you. It's like, that's rude. This is so stinking rude. Make enough for everybody and move on, okay? But absolutely loved all of them. I've been kind of slightly partially tempted to get just the neutral one, which Teresa is Dead absolutely loves. And I'm like, I kind of want to complete my ice cream cone, but I kind of have those shades a lot. I mean, let's be real. I had the other shades a lot as well, but I use green a lot as well, as y'all can say. Probably one of my best affordable drugstore experiences of 2020. They looked so beautiful online. I'm honestly counting, like, not counting, thanking my lucky stars because when I got my order, y'all may have seen on Snapchat, they sent it in this like a vacuum cleaner sized box and I had like 4 or 5 little eyeshadow palettes in it and I opened it up and they had they hadn't sent me the cotton candy one and I was like, hey, and they're like, well, did we really not send it? And I was like, yeah. I ended up being really nice about it, but they sent me a new one and I'm like, surprised I managed to get one because it was after that they were just gone. Absolutely loved them though. Worth every sinking penny I spent on them. They're definitely one of the items that are coming back with me into Tennessee. All right, so clearly we've got to talk about some indie makeup because 2020 was truly the initial start of Soraya into the ever so wonderful rabbit hole of said indie makeup. I predict that 2021 will not be much different for me because 2020 I did have a lot of disillusion when it came to the mainstream companies. They've been out here wilding, doing all kinds of whatever, while indie companies have been keeping it straight and strong and formulated and everything like that. One of those palettes, I'm not sure if it was released in January. I think it was January. I think I reviewed it in January or February, but the Midas Cosmetics X Smoky Glow palette. Y'all know from my review, this palette blew my mind, and it ended up making me buy a lot more Midas Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes. They have, for the price, a fantastic formula, and the Smoky Glow palette was just, it had the reds and the pinks and the neutrals. It was very much a color story that was within my wheelhouse. The matte to shimmer ratio was absolutely fantastic, and I love that palette. I'm not sure why I didn't bring it with me here to Tennessee, partly because I think I didn't know how long I was going to be, what I was going to be using. Maybe I didn't want to bring that many red tones with me. I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely coming back with me when I go to Virginia and come back to Tennessee because that palette is such a wonderful experience to use. Like, seriously, when I would like try this for the first time, I was like, wow, I would put this on par with ABH. I would put this on par with a lot of Jeffree Star. I would say that it's better than Too Faced, Urban Decay, Tarte, and a lot of those sort of that level of eyeshadow quality. It surpasses. The color story was absolutely beautiful. The formulations were just really good. Like, I remember just being in the bathroom using it for the first time, being like, all right, let's see what happens, and just being absolutely blown away. It was a palette that I highly recommended to people, and it became on my list of eyeshadow palettes to recommend when people were like, what? I want something kind of rosy. I want something kind of a la ABH Modern Renaissance leaning. I would just say, if you haven't tried Midas Cosmetics, the Smoky Glow palette is absolutely the bomb diggity shiznit. They know what they are doing when it comes to eyeshadow formulations, and honestly, they know what they're doing when it comes to a lot of formulations. I was really happy to see a lot of the blow up that Midas Cosmetics got this year, not just from Hannah, but from Abby, from Lacey, from Teresa, from all those smaller influencers really pushing this company because it has solid quality products. Not only that, it is also a company that does great inclusivity. I mean, the Neon MUA release, I didn't get it because I did not need another face palette, but just from the light to the dark and the awards, that I'm just like, yes, this is the wave of the future, y'all. And I did really love that palette. Like, I'm talking about all these palettes, and I'm like, I'm gonna be bringing basically everything back with me because I'm thinking about all of these, and I'm getting all kinds of hot and bothered about all kinds of different makeup looks I'm wanting to do. We've got to have another indie on here, an indie company that I was introduced to in 2020 from Lacey, Teresa, basically all the little smaller influencers, people that are well versed in the indie makeup universe, because I was just like a little youngling coming in and being like, please, for to impart your wisdom to me. And part of their wisdom was like, bitch, you gotta try out the Collidos makeup. And I was like, I tried the highlighters, but they're eyeshadows. I don't know when they're like those 6-pan palettes were released, but they did do the Escape Pod collection, and that palette, I mean, artistry in packaging and aesthetic alone, like, I would say a lot of their packaging, a lot of their aesthetic, and a lot of that is a lot more solid than the majority of what a lot of mainstream makeup companies are coming out with. It just felt high quality. It was there. The eyeshadow quality was just absolutely loved it. The eyeshadow color theory of the Escape Pod one was a little bit jumbled, a little bit crazy. I was like, ooh, this is definitely a Butte Bean eyeshadow palette moment. But even all that, I mean, that green shimmer, that purple, they just have shades that just stand out to me that I'm like, yes, you make me happy. It's just sort of a like, I love you too, random eyeshadow. Absolutely fell in love with the formula. We're going to talk about some of them highlighters in another video. Just so good. Finding and trying a bunch of these indie companies has been such a wonderful experience, and Collidos is one of those that just gives you just everything in spades. Like, everything is done so well, from formulation to packaging to aesthetic to theme. It's just all thought out. Another company that does inclusivity very well, not just in their shade range, but in their ad campaigns. They are an indie makeup company that I 110% give my stamp of approval on. There's only been one thing by them that I haven't enjoyed, and that was the eye primer. Everything else has been fantastic and the absolute bomb diggity shiznit. And I think that is all that we have, at least on this list. If I forgot anything, I'm sorry. I will rack my brain and maybe there'll be a random floating eyeshadow palette and just my best makeup of 2020. I would like to have a honorable mention, just a teensy bit of a footnote, because I did buy the palette and I do stand by its quality, the Jeffree Star cremated palette. Say what you will about him as a person, I don't buy his products anymore. I don't support what anymore, but that palette was very well formulated. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I would absolutely love to hear what y'all have to say about the eyeshadow palettes that I talked about. I know there has been just so many more released that could even be like fathomed. I'm really happy with my selection. I'm happy with like how much I brought into, well, mostly happy. At the end of the year, I did kind of go a little bit crazy there, but for the most part, I am happy with what I have introduced into my collection this year. I would also love to hear about an eyeshadow palette that you think was one of the best out of 2020. But thank you guys so much for watching. I love you, and as always, keep it real. Mwah!